I'm Camila Reyes, and I grew up never knowing what safety felt like. My childhood passed in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, Arizona, with second-hand clothes from charity shops and my mother. Her eyes shadowed from night shifts at a small diner. My mom, Teresa, was my only support, a woman with calloused hands but a warm, unshakable heart who never let poverty dull her hope. Every night, she came home around 1 a.m., smelling of grease and coffee, yet still smiling as she opened a library book to read to me about far-off places. Kyoto, Barcelona, or ancient ruins in Peru. "The world out there is so big, Camila," she'd say, eyes glowing despite her exhaustion. Those moments, the two of us curled up on a worn-out couch, planted a seed in me. I had to get out of here and make her proud. Money was always a shadow looming over us. My mom skipped meals so I could eat, took me to free community festivals, and showed me folk dances and the rhythms of culture she only knew from books. She taught me a few Spanish phrases she remembered from high school, hoping I'd dream beyond our circumstances. But by the time I got to high school, I saw those sacrifices draining her. Bills stacked up, her shoes wore through. I couldn't bear it. At 16, I made a decision. I wouldn't go to college. I'd graduate and start working immediately. My mom cried, begged me to reconsider. "Sweetheart, education is your only ticket out," she said, voice trembling. But I was stubborn. I just wanted to ease her burden so she wouldn't have to count every dollar for groceries. I had no idea then that my Spanish skills would open a door, or that those library stories would become a compass for my life. During high school, I met Maya Delgado, a girl from El Paso living a life just as hard as mine. We were a perfect match, sharing cheap lunches, learning to smile through weekends with no plans. Maya helped me grow fluent in Spanish, and I slowly gained confidence speaking it. When I told her I wouldn't go to college, she just nodded, never judged. She too chose to work right away, chasing her dream of becoming an event planner. After graduation, we went our separate ways. I landed a job at a small travel agency in Phoenix. They needed someone to assist Spanish-speaking clients. I was nervous planning my first trip for a family going to Colombia, but it felt like I was touching the magical world my mom used to describe. I worked tirelessly, learning every detail of the business, from flights to hotels to local culture. Every customer was a step forward in proving that I didn't need a degree to succeed. At 26, I traveled to Santa Barbara to meet a client at a luxury resort. That's where I met Daniel King, a front desk clerk with a smile that made my heart skip. He brought me coffee, joked with flawless Spanish. We talked whenever I visited, about work, about family. Daniel shared how he lost his father young and stayed close to his mother, Elaine, to hold the family together. I told him about my mom, about her quiet sacrifices. We fell in love before I even realized it. 6 months later, Daniel proposed to me on the beach at sunset. I said yes, believing I had found someone who truly saw me. Then he suggested I move in with him and his mother in Santa Barbara. "Mom's been living alone since Dad passed. You work from home, right? It'll be convenient," he said gently. I hesitated, remembering my mother's words. "Love is beautiful, but don't rush into things." But I wanted to believe, I wanted to start a family. So I moved in. But the moment I met my future mother-in-law, Elaine King, I knew I was walking into a storm. The house was exquisitely decorated, every item gleaming like a museum piece. She asked about my job, my background, and then suddenly, "Where did you go to college?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "I didn't go to college, ma'am. I started working right after high school." The smile faded from her face, and a heavy silence followed. "Oh, just high school. That's simple. You should learn your place," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. I looked at Daniel, hoping he'd speak up for me, but he just gently squeezed my hand, completely unaware. That moment planted a seed of doubt, but I pushed it aside. I loved Daniel and I believed I could do this, that I could fit in, make it work. Moving in with his mother, Elaine, was the first real test. Her house was like a museum, a shrine to the glamorous life she once had, attending galas in silk gowns, before her husband passed and everything started slipping away. Daniel said she needed someone around, and since I worked remotely, I agreed to help with the house. But Elaine's welcome was as cold as the marble floors beneath my feet. Don't touch those crystal glasses. Mop the floors every day. They need to shine. Her commands became invisible chains tightening by the day. I told myself it was only temporary, that she'd change once she saw how hard I was trying. Daniel also promised that if things got too difficult, he'd talk to her. I clung to that promise like a life raft, ignoring the growing tightness in my chest. But living with Elaine felt like walking on eggshells. At first it was dusting, vacuuming, then it became a full-time job. "My room better be spotless by 9 a.m. she'd shout from the sofa while watching her morning soap operas. I bit my lip, finished my client calls, then rushed to clean. At night, I'd hunch over my laptop, my eyes aching, body drained. Even though my business was growing, I'd launched an online travel platform specializing in luxury tours. To Elaine, I was still just a freeloader. "That laptop of yours isn't a real job," she'd scoff. Her words stirred up all the old insecurities I carried about not going to college. I called my mom, Teresa, and her voice, as always, was steady. "You're enough, Camila. Don't let anyone dim your light." Her words gave me strength. But Elaine's contempt weighed heavier and heavier on me. I didn't know how much longer I could endure. 3 months later at dinner, she suddenly announced, "Daniel and I are planning a trip to Italy. Someone needs to stay and watch the house. Camila, you're free, right?" Felt like a slap. They were planning to leave me behind. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something. He just stared down at his plate of pasta, avoiding my eyes. That night, I pulled him aside. "You knew about this trip. Am I not invited?" Daniel sighed, rubbing his neck. "You misunderstood, Camila. Of course you're coming. Mom probably just phrased it wrong." His answer felt weak. When I said I didn't want to go if Elaine was going to treat me that way, he snapped. "You're being too sensitive. It's just a vacation. Can't you get along with my mom?" I stood frozen. After all the effort, all the sacrifices I'd made for this relationship, he still couldn't take my side. That night, I lay awake wondering, who am I in this house? A wife? Or just a guest with no place of her own? The next morning, I decided to confront her. I needed to speak openly with Elaine. At breakfast, Daniel was there, a rare day off for him. The air was tense like a tightened string. I looked straight at her. "Did you deliberately leave me out of the Italy trip?" He smirked. "If you wanted to go, just say it. Don't blow things out of proportion like a child." Daniel cut in, his tone annoyed. "Camila, apologize to my mom. You're overreacting." I turned to him, feeling betrayed. Before I could respond, Elaine leaned forward, eyes cold. "Let's be honest, Camila. That trip might be a bit too refined for someone who only finished high school and sits around typing all day. Do you really think you deserve it?" Each word cut like a blade. I was speechless. "I'm not unemployed, ma'am. Have a real job. I've told you about my company." She let out a bitter laugh. "A job? Tapping on a laptop while spending Daniel's money? You're a parasite, Camila. Get out." I couldn't breathe. Her words hit every hidden fear I had. I looked to Daniel, begging him silently to take my side. He just shrugged. "Maybe you should calm down, Camila." That was enough. "Fine. I'll go." I stood up, hands trembling. I grabbed my keys and walked out of a house that had never truly felt like mine. "Good luck surviving on your own, leech." Her final words slammed the door on the past behind me. I didn't look back. But inside me, a plan was already forming. Not revenge, but liberation. Less than 3 months after leaving, I was sitting on the balcony of a villa in Maui. Sea breeze brushing through my hair when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. It was Elaine. "Camila, what's going on? We're being threatened with utility shutoffs. Electricity, water, everything." I leaned back in my chair, calm. "Sounds like someone forgot to pay the bills," I said. She stammered, panic rising in her voice. I thought Daniel handled all that. Why didn't you say you were the one paying everything? I almost laughed. During my time living with them, the travel platform I had built had grown rapidly, bringing in nearly $15 million in revenue. I had been quietly covering all their bills, electricity, credit cards, while being called a burden. They spent recklessly, designer dresses, fine dining, never realizing who was footing the costs. It turned out Elaine had blown through the inheritance from her late husband, living like royalty until the bank account ran dry. She leaned on Daniel, assuming his resort job was stable, but in reality he was barely making ends meet. Worse, they had racked up nearly $300,000 in debt, all under the assumption I would always be there to absorb it. "You can help, can't you, Camila?" she pleaded. I pictured her cold face that morning, the cruel words still ringing in my ears. "I already did," I replied, my voice like steel. Daniel grabbed the phone. "You're my wife. You can't just leave us like this." I gazed out over the ocean. "I'm in Hawaii, Daniel. My vacation villa. If you can afford a plane ticket, feel free to visit." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end. "Oh, and by the way, did you notice this is an international call? It's on your bill." Hung up. My heart was racing, but I felt lighter and prouder than ever. They had underestimated me for too long. And now, I wasn't some silent shadow anymore. I was free. A week later, I flew back to California to finalize the divorce. Daniel was at the lawyer's office, looking exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "You were planning to pay for the Italy trip, weren't you?" he mumbled. I wasn't surprised anymore. From the start, he and his mother had seen me as a walking wallet, never realizing I had quietly built an empire. I handed him the divorce papers, my signature bold and decisive. "Good luck, Daniel," I said, and I truly meant it, but in the way that forced him to learn how to stand on his own. He lowered his head, speechless. Now Daniel and Elaine had to face hundreds of thousands in debt, and no one left to bail them out. I could help them. But why would I? They had looked down on me, assumed I'd always bow my head. Instead, I offered one final piece of advice. "Get a job. Cut the spending. You'll be fine." Daniel's face turned pale. "You said you would help." Smiled. "I am helping you learn how to stand on your own." I turned away. Behind me was the man who once promised to love me forever. In front of me was the life I was rewriting from scratch. Back in Fresno, I visited my mother. When I told her everything, her eyes lit up with pride. "You're stronger than I ever dreamed." She held me tightly. In that moment, all the pain seemed to melt away. Hawaii wasn't just a place to escape. It was a symbol of the journey I had made. My villa overlooked the deep blue ocean, the waves crashing against the rocks like a reminder of how far I'd come. My travel business had grown to an international level, connecting thousands of people to the destinations I once only read about in books. But my greatest joy was bringing my mother to live with me. She walked through the house, gently touching the walls, as if she couldn't believe it was real. "You did it, Camila," she whispered, tears in her eyes. And then a surprise. Maya Delgado, my high school friend, also lived on a nearby beach. She was now the CEO of a major event planning company. Her smile just as radiant as I remembered. We drank coffee, reminiscing about the days of cheap tacos and no weekend plans, sharing the stories of how we made it. Her family had also moved there, and on many evenings we had dinner together, laughing like we had never been apart. "We made it," Maya said, clinking her glass with mine. "For our moms. For ourselves." I heard Daniel and Elaine were now working 2 jobs each to pay off their debts. I don't hate them. But the lesson is theirs, and they have to learn it on their own. As for me, I've come home. Not just to Hawaii, but to myself. I've realized that my worth doesn't come from a diploma or anyone's approval. It comes from the life I've built with my own hands, the love I give, and the dreams I continue to chase. If you've stayed with me through this journey, through heartbreak, betrayal, and the rise back up, thank you. Hit follow to hear more stories like this. Stories about strength, family, and new horizons. Keep going, dream big, and I'll be waiting for you, where the waves crash and anything is possible. From a girl without a college degree, once dismissed and called a freeloader, Camila rose to become a successful entrepreneur with a multimillion-dollar travel platform. Through resilience, perseverance, and love for her mother, she overcame her former in-laws' scorn and built a new life in Hawaii, where she welcomed her mom home, reunited with an old friend, and now enjoys the fruits of her quiet determination. Camila's story is proof that true worth doesn't come from a diploma, but from inner strength and self-respect. What do you think about Camila's choice to walk away and rebuild her life? Would you have done anything differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more